Welcome to Grieving Insomniacs. This is your host, Christy Haberman. I have been gone for the last couple of months, not recording any episodes. I've had a lot of personal things going on. And so I am back at it, back to start recording, talking about what it's like to be a grieving mom. So there's so much I need to catch you up on. Let's talk about Christopher's birthday. This is the 13th year that Christopher has been gone from this earth. And his birthday was May 27th. I mean, it was okay. We went out to dinner, had his favorite food, and then I took it to the grave like I do every year. But it's just been different this year. It's been really different. We went on vacation to Sedona right after Christopher's birthday. It's just hard because I know that Christopher wanted to travel and he wanted to be a nurse, and I know that it was important to him. And I went to a spiritual vortex. I was standing up there and I was just contemplating my own spiritual journey that I have gone through since Christopher died. I've heard people talk about the dark night of the soul and how that's a spiritual crisis that people go through. It's when your whole world just is destroyed and then you end up rebuilding afterwards. And I really think that my dark night of the soul was definitely when Christopher died. It turned my whole world upside down in ways that I'm just starting to understand. I talk about this all the time. And for those of you that listen that are just starting out on this grief journey, it's not always going to be this painful. I don't know how to reassure you of that it's not always going to be as painful as it is in the beginning. So what I've noticed since I've been doing this podcast, I really encourage you to find a way to do a deep dive into your own issues that you have surrounding the loss of your child, and an artistic outlet, so to speak, whether it be drawing, writing. For me, it's been this podcast. And what I've noticed is talking to this anonymous audience has helped me heal in many ways. And it's helped me analyze how I feel. And it's been a little bit of a difficult journey. I no longer have my promotion. I'm back into my regular position. But honestly, the last month I have just been decompressing, trying to get back to where I was before I started the promotion as far as stress. I've started walking more. I'm actually currently in the middle of a health crisis, which has been a little scary because the health crisis is very similar to Christopher's health crisis. I gotta tell you, that was scary. So I had a doctor's appointment right before I went on vacation. Got some news that I really didn't anticipate getting. I had a doctor's appointment right after I got back from vacation and right before Christopher's death date. And that did not go the way that I wanted it to go. And this is when I start thinking about the dark night of the soul. How this very similar situation to what happened with Christopher is currently happening to me. And I wasn't handling it well at first. I had all of these fears about what the future would look like. And if my future was going to be the same as Christopher's future. And thankfully it's not. I have decided in my own mind that it's not going to be, and that our attitude determines everything. And so I've learned a lot through the last couple of months, and that's part of the reason why I haven't been recording either. But also I had this experience at work too. I don't talk about my podcast to people. I'm pretty quiet about it. those that know, like my best friends know about it, but nobody else knows about it. I am on the down low, so to speak, about it. Well, we had this training at work, and they're trying to go to the Brene Brown type of leadership where you're vulnerable with your employees. And what we had to do was disclose our journey as much or as little as you wanted to disclose. I knew that there was no way that I could do this assignment without talking about Christopher. There's just no way. And this goes back to the dark night of the soul again, which was that experience changed me so incredibly much that I'm positive the people that knew me before Christopher died that interact with me would not recognize me after. It was that dramatic of a change. But that is what the dark night of the soul does, from what I understand. It was related to a spiritual crisis, and where they really dug a deep dive into the Bible to find answers to the spiritual crisis that they were experiencing. When I say the dark night of the soul, I'm talking about how my life just ended. The life I knew just ended, and then having to rebuild a new life. So I had to draw this little map. Then I had to stand up in front of my peers and talk about what my journey had been like. And I cried all the way through it. And I was pretty vulnerable because I told them that it's such a life-changing experience that when you look in the mirror, you don't know who you are anymore and you don't recognize yourself. I think that had a really powerful impact on the people around me. But what it's done for me personally is I feel exposed. I think I'm okay with being vulnerable on my podcast as long as I somewhat controlled who listened to it. And I know that doesn't make sense because I have, 58, 59 regular subscribers, 50,000 or 5,000 listens on my podcast. I'm really pretty proud of that, actually. I know those ones that have 1,000,000, it doesn't even really compare, but that's a big deal to me. And the vulnerability of it, I was not ready for that level of vulnerability. So I wanted to do a podcast on Christopher's death day, which was June 19th. And I've been afraid to be vulnerable again on my podcast because now I've exposed myself. I've exposed myself for who I am. And it's very difficult. And it's become more and more difficult the longer I was a grieving mom. And this is an experience I know all of you have experienced because we're all here together listening to this podcast. Like we were brought to this podcast because we all lost children. So you know what it's like when you're vulnerable to people and say, I lost a child. A, they stop talking to you. 2, they say something stupid. Or 3, they minimize your loss. None of the outcomes is good. Like I've never had a good outcome from being vulnerable about losing my child. And everybody handles it different. Some people talk about it a lot, but I'm just not that person. So I've been feeling really vulnerable, which has been interfering with my podcast and my recording of the podcast. And it's just a little heartbreaking. But then afterwards, I met with my supervisor. He asked me who knew about it. Does everybody on center know about this? I'm like, nope, they don't. They don't talk about it. And then he asked me, well, why did you disclose it? You didn't have to. And I just looked at him and said, but it completely changed who I am. To understand who I am, you need to understand that changed me. And I told him it made me feel vulnerable. And, and then he said, well, you didn't have to say it. So people that don't lose children or haven't lost children don't understand what's that like. How do you ignore one of your children? Because isn't that what he was asking me? And I know I struggled with this when Christopher first died. And when somebody had asked me, how many children do you have? Do you say one because there's only one living? Or do you say two? And in his simple question, he just didn't know. And I don't know that he has children of his own. So I don't know if he has an idea of how triggering that is. I don't think that even the guy that asked us to do it, and if he listens to my podcast, maybe he does, what I would say to him is that be careful when you do that. Not everybody is willing to be that vulnerable. Not to mention, it was between that period of time when Christopher's birthday and Christopher dying, like right in that period of time that I was just like, oh, why are you making me make these choices? I told him, and then he just looked at me, and I said, because when you tell people you lost your child, they don't talk to you anymore. That's why you don't say anything. At least that's my experience. And he just didn't say anything. So I understand that Brene Brown says that you need to be vulnerable as a leader and be vulnerable to telling people how you feel. But I'm not sure that that includes everything. Like, I believe in being real about how I feel or being real about information. But I don't agree with being real to people I supervise, particularly about your traumas. And especially after this time that I made that choice. But again, it's a non-choice, right? Because how do you leave out one of your children? Like, you can't. Like, maybe some people do. Maybe they would have taken the route of not talking about it. Then you could just say, okay, my life ended here on this date. Like, oh, I don't know. I don't know the answer to it. I really don't. I only know the answer to me. I don't know how the rest of you handle that. If you would have handled it different, leave me a message like on my Facebook or my Instagram and let me know, how would you have handled that? What would you have done? What would you have disclosed? So the consequences of disclosing personally. I've been having lots of dreams about work, and I'm naked, and everybody finds out about me being naked, and then I'm going to get fired. And those are anxiety dreams. Those are anxiety dreams about being vulnerable. And I've been having lots of them since it happened. And I'm having to come to peace with the fact that I exposed this part of me that I had kept to myself for so long. It's also a vulnerable time of year. So if I had been asked that question in December, would I have cried through the presentation? Maybe not, but probably. And it's a question that I think many of us that have lost children face is, how vulnerable do you want to be? Even though I come on this podcast and I talk to you all, and I am pretty vulnerable. I tell you guys things that I don't tell anybody else. So I understand what they're trying to do. I'm just not sure that that was the right take for me. So I'm still struggling with the dreams. We had another death in the family. We were on vacation. It was actually our anniversary. And her sister-in-law died. She died on a Tuesday. And we're still on vacation. They didn't decide till that Thursday when the funeral was going to be, and they were going to have it that Saturday. So, I mean, we're talking quick. My poor husband wanted to go to the funeral, but there was no way for him to get there. Like, we were close to a major airport because we were in Arizona, but they lived in a small town in Georgia, and there was no way for him to get there in time for the funeral. So he couldn't go. And that's the other thing that I think was kind of on the selfish side. Is like, everybody should be given an opportunity to be there. I don't know why they went so fast. So we have that. We have the 27th when Christopher died. We went on vacation to Arizona. And I was going to record from there, but that didn't work out. Then we come back from Arizona, and it's our granddaughter's birthday, and my husband's birthday, and then my son's mother-in-law died. And that was very hard. She also died of cancer. And we watched her throughout this process because we see him at holidays and when we're around the kids or the grandkids, and it was heartbreaking. But what made it even harder was she was going to be buried on the day that Christopher died. Now, I'm a firm believer in showing up for your kids. I am. I have never gone to the funeral home since Christopher was, I don't know what the right word is for where his wake was. I hadn't been there since then, but I went there for my son. And I'm glad I did. You just can tell the difference between someone that's lived a very long life and someone that, like Christopher, that died young. And so that was the night before Christopher died. And then on the 19th, we went not to the funeral. I just told my son I don't think I could handle that on that day. But we did go to the burying and the reception. And it's so hard because you realize that life really does go on. And that's what my son was talking about. He says he feels like his world stopped. He was really close to his mother-in-law. They were a close family. The grandkids were close. He was close to all of the sisters. I mean, it was a close family. So this is a very large loss for both my son, my daughter-in-law, and my grandchildren. And it was just heartbreaking. And then my son said he didn't remember that Christopher died on the 19th of June. And I felt bad because I felt like I reminded him of it. I mean, it is what it is. And like he told me, it's never far from your mind. And sometimes I just say things, right, that fall out of my mouth. And we were at the wake, and my daughter-in-law says, "This is so hard." And I said to her, "This is the easy part. Continuing to live is the hard part." And I still stand by that. And I was thinking to myself, where did you become such a philosopher? Maybe you shouldn't have said that. But at the same time, it's true. The hard part from having lost our children or having someone that we love die and move on to the spirit world is continuing to live. And how you live is up to you. And I think that's where the dark night of the soul comes in. Because everything you believe in crumbles when someone dies. And we'll talk about children. When our children die, everything we believe in falls away. And for me, it was a spiritual crisis. I questioned everything I believed, everything I knew about God. I questioned everything. And I was mad and I was angry. And I was angry about how I grew up and the missed opportunities. And there was just a lot. So that was definitely my dark night of the soul. And I think coming out of that dark night of the soul is when you start to figure out how to live after they've gone. How are you going to live? What are you going to prioritize? What does life without them look like? I went to counseling and I was asked, what do you believe in? After Christopher died. And I told her, I believe that Christopher is accessible to me in any moment of time, that he is present through music, through signs, that I still can maintain this relationship with him through the love I have for him. Like we're connected through the fact that we love each other. And I believe that wherever he is, well, whatever you believe according to your religious beliefs, that that feeling of love exists for him also. It's both of us, and we are together in that. So one of the things I realized going through this situation that's very personal is that I've reached this level of emotional maturity where I don't have to react to everything, and where I'm able to just let things be. And a lot of it is due to this podcast. I'm still looking for guests that would like to come on and be on the podcast. If you'd like to come on and tell your story, or if you want to come on and just talk about the loss of your particular child or your particular situation, feel free to reach out to me. It's probably better on social media. I do not get to my email as often as I should. I also want to say that I had somebody reach out that wanted to come on the podcast to talk about a topic that was not related to losing your child. I strictly stick to that particular topic. That's what my podcast is about. That is where my passion is. That is, for lack of a better word, who I am. And so if you want to sell your books or sell things, my podcast is not the podcast for you. My podcast is to tell stories, to be real, to be vulnerable. And it's easier for those of you that are scared because people don't see your face. So I did start a YouTube channel. I'm going to start editing those videos and taking out that awful music. That will probably be a winter project, though. I live in the north where right now it's beautiful summer. And so while it's beautiful summer, I don't do much as far as keeping my website up and those kind of things. You gotta kind of go with the weather here up here in the north. So thanks for listening. Thanks for my rambling. I think I've got you caught up. I'll try to be on a more regular podcast schedule. Thanks for listening and have a great day.